Welcome to Power Your Profits podcast, your friendly guide in bringing your business revenue to the next level. Listen as host Susie Carder hears inspiring stories of success from her fellow entrepreneurs and transformational leaders. Prepare to make significant change to your strategies as they unravel the secrets of building multi-million-dollar businesses and the most effective tips on finance, marketing, and sales accountability. If you want to make your first step towards explosive business growth, this is the right podcast for you. Without further ado, here is your host, Susie. Welcome to Power Your Profits podcast. I'm your host, Susie Carder, and I am so excited to share this episode with you. I'm interviewing Jeremy Slate, and he's the founder of Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. He studied literature at Oxford University and specializes using podcasts and new media to create celebrity, and was ranked the #1 in iTunes New and 78 in iTunes Top 100. He was named #1 podcast to listeners on Inc. magazine in 2019, as well as being named top influencer by Forbes. After his success in podcasting, Jeremy Slate and his wife, Burrell, founded Command Your Brand to help entrepreneurs get their message out by appearing as a guest on podcasts. Please welcome my guest, Jeremy. Oh my God, Jeremy, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to share you with our tribe and our community. So before I start jumping in, said your bio, amazing. Let's talk about your magic. Like, what is your magic? What is your sweet spot? Why are you the jam?
Well, I've had a podcast since 2015 called the Create Your Own Life Show, where I've got to interview tons of world-class performers. And it's really helped me to, I guess, kind of, hang my shingle in the podcast space. And because of that, people started asking for help. And, what we've done since 2016 is help people to tell a better story on the right podcast and really build relationships with that so that they can get their brand out there. Recently, I've been doing a lot more with my personal brand as I had a book come out in June. And it's been fun. Thank you. It was a couple years in the making, but it's been exciting.
That's exciting. Congratulations. It's a big deal, right? To go, now the fun begins. You got to sell it.
Yeah, which that's been interesting as well, since we're kind of, I've been doing a lot of podcasts to promote it. We've been doing a lot of YouTube ads. It's been interesting kind of learning the whole thing around how to get a book out there.
Yeah, I remember my first book I wrote. I'm like, I'm going to write a book and I'll be famous. Yeah, right.
Well, I think that's a like an incorrect idea people have, right? Like, I think that it's, for the most part, like the ages of people getting the big advance and stuff like that, for most people, unless you're kind of a corrupt politician trying to get paid off, don't really exist anymore. Really what it's about is, solidifying your brand, adding credibility, giving people kind of another way to kind of get into your head.
Yes, that's what we tell all our students. So let's talk about how brands can utilize the $1 billion podcast market. Because I know a lot of our students have podcasts, but they're not making money at it, not leveraging it. So let's talk about that.
Well, I think, Susie, the first part goes to expectations, because I think a lot of people have the totally incorrect expectations on what a podcast is going to do for them. And it kind of comes from that model of like, people thinking like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to create this landing page and I'm going to be a millionaire. And what you have to understand is, for most people, I started my show in 2015, so it's a little bit different now versus how it was then. It's a lot harder to just start a podcast now and become famous because of that podcast, right? For most people, how it should sit in your business is promoting what you already do and creating that know, like, and trust factor, right? Giving people a way to know you, like you, and trust you. Because the podcasting market is a multi-billion-dollar market now. I think it's like 1.5 billion in total advertising was spent on podcasts last year. So there are brands going in on it. And I guess the question is, why are they going in on it? Because it's a place to have long-form content you can't get anywhere else. Like, people really get to know you as opposed to any other form of media. So you're really creating trust for them. So if you want to embrace it the right way, you have to have the expectations. This should support your business, but for most people, it's not going to be a business in itself. It should help you to create relationships with people that you maybe, like, I've never had to pitch for an event to speak, I always just get asked to speak because I'm on lots of podcasts and I'm out to make friends, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. So that's one part of it, is how do you build relationships? Two is you can build affiliate offers into it, which is great, but it's not always going to be kind of that high ticket thing for a lot of people. But you want to create that know, like, and trust factor so that when people want to make a decision to work with your company, they're going to do it because they've seen your content, consumed your content, and they really know you. So I think if you're really going to use a podcast the right way, it's having the expectations and realizing it is a vehicle to help your business grow more. It's not really a vehicle in itself.
Right, juicy. And so let's talk about, because people get confused, right? They think, I love that you're giving us these distinctions. Let's look at PR versus marketing.
Yeah.
And how do we leverage both? What's that right combination?
So I see it as like, and if you want to get more granular in this, there's more to it than that. But in basics, there's really three parts to every business. There's PR, marketing, and sales. PR creates the pieces and the trust for marketing to be able to promote something, to be able to create people that want to actually buy your service. And you can kind of work it either way, right? Like, you always want to start with PR because people should trust you and know who you are. But if you're not selling, right, then you take a look at the marketing, you see if something's broken. If something's not broken, you take a look at, okay, why do people not have trust in me? And so PR is that creating that know, like, and trust factor. Public relations, the idea, like, to kind of define the term, a public is a type of audience, and public relations is how you relate to that audience, right? Your public could be other business owners, it could be teachers, it could be all different types of people. That's a public, the group you want to understand you. Saying my audience is everyone is not a really good thing, because you're not going to have a public that can relate to you. So in that way, it's creating the factor where people know you, like you, and trust you. Now, marketing is the actual action of promoting the pieces you've created, or, adding traffic or concepts to get it out there. And then sales are people actually coming in and wanting to buy your product and service. So when you can really take a look at, like, okay, marketing is promoting the actions, PR is creating trust. And if you're spending a lot on, paid traffic or things like that, you may want to take a look at the public relations program you're doing, because people may not trust you enough. I think people often look at, okay, well, is the copy written right? Is the targeting right? Those things could be perfect. But if people don't trust you, or you don't have relevance to them, those things aren't going to work as well.
I love it. And so when you look at your business, how are you building trust? Because there is a strategy, know, like, and trust factor. So what are some of the things that you do as a business so that people see your authenticity, your transparency?
Well, part of it, frankly, is like drinking our own Kool-Aid. So, like, we help people to get on podcasts. That's one of the main ways that we actually promote our business, is by having me on other podcasts. But in terms of like content creation as well, like, I'm big on long form written content. So I do contributing for a bunch of different websites, which is helpful because it creates trust there. I also have hundreds of posts that I've written on our company site and on my own site and things like that, because people need to be able to get a win from your content and learn from your content. So we're focusing hard on podcasts we're appearing on and adding value, written content, which is a big deal. And when I say written content, I mean articles should be a minimum of 600 words, because you want something people can get a ton out of. That sweet spot is like 700 to 900 words to really have a great article, because it's not just kind of like an info piece, but it's something people can really get a lot out of. And as well, just really trying to do a great job with my own podcast helps as well, because what we do is in the podcast space. So I'm trying to constantly get higher caliber guests, reaching out to celebrities and athletes and people like that, and building that brand also creates trust too. So those are the kind of the main ways that, we're doing it. In terms as well, like, I think when people understand how to use a podcast guest appearance, I think there's also wrapping your head around that as well, because I think a lot of times people think that, okay, I get in front of X number of people, this many people opt in, this many people buy my product. And that's not really the case. What you're doing is you're creating a relationship and you're creating awareness, but you also want to give people a place they can continue that relationship. So we usually say, if you're going to give something away on a podcast, it should be like a survey or an applicable tool to what you talked about, right? Because when you're looking at education, it has two parts. It has the actual theory of it and the doingness of it. So you want to give people something they can do after that interview, and it kind of brings them into your world, and then you can market to them and sell to them and things like that.
Right. And so that really positions you to the go-to in your space. What else are you doing to position yourself to be the go-to person in your space?
So I think one of the biggest things in the branding world, there's a concept called positioning, and positioning is really what you're seen for or against. You're grabbing something people are already familiar with, and you're grabbing that spot in their brain. And I hate this one the most, Susie, but it's the one people are most familiar with. So I'm going to use that. And that's where people say we're the Uber of blank, because they're taking something people are familiar with. They're like, oh, okay, I know what Uber is, so I have an idea of what you do. So the way you can actually really hack that positioning in your space, frankly, by having your own podcast, is interviewing people that are experts in your space. And when I say that, I mean also like really niching down on that, niching down to it hurts almost, because that broad audience isn't going to help you. But by talking to other people that are in your space, you're actually enhancing your own positioning, because now when they think of, XYZ influencer, they think of you. And when you're able to do that, you're really able to, enhance your positioning. Like, what positioning are we trying to achieve here?
So give me an example of that. So space, for example. So who would be the person or the people that you would interview so that people see that?
So for me, it's changed a little bit from where I started, but I'll give you an example of early on. Grant Cardone was kind of a big, like positioning person for my audience. He was one of the first 100 guests I had on the show. And that really helped me get a lot of credibility that I still have to this day because of that. So people have come and joined my audience because of that. When they land on my site, see that as credibility. So for me, that was good. It's interesting in kind of the PR world, because, other PR agencies don't always want to talk to you, right? So in that way, you have to use more of kind of like celebrity credibility and speaking to kind of different audiences to do that, if that makes sense.
So share with us, how do we measure the success of the podcast? So you have downloads, you have like you've hit number one, in iTunes, you hit the top 100. So let's talk about that. How do we
Yeah.
measure versus, oh, I have 100 interviews or whatever. Like, who cares?
There's a couple different things I'm looking at, because I don't think downloads and things like that really matter that much. Because the thing that actually ranks you in Apple Podcasts, since it changes every 24 hours, is subscribers. So driving in subscribers is kind of the big thing that kind of changes the game for ranking. But I don't put a lot of emphasis on ranking, because those change every 24 hours. I think the thing you need to be looking at, and something we do every single week, is we do a Google search for my name in quotation marks, the company name in quotation marks, and any of our services in quotation marks. And then we take a look at, based on that, how many results and pages on Google do we have now? And if we're doing that, then I'm becoming more and more and more relevant. So that's what I'm kind of looking at. Media hits is a really big part of it. We're also taking a look at Google News Alerts is another one. So alerts.google.com, we set up alerts for, once again, my company name in quotation marks and my name in quotation marks. And then we're tracking those hits as well, because that's once again showing relevance. So those are the things that I'm kind of looking at with PR, because everything else is so hard to track, right? That we're really taking a look at media hits and what's out there, because that is kind of creating that more of that know, like, and trust factor. And the reason I use quotation marks is because you're going to get a lot of things that aren't relevant to your search if you don't use that.
Right. And then who's managing that for you on your team?
So we have our marketing team actually managing that. And then we also have somebody on our team that's called a brand ambassador. And that person as well is he's doing calls with previous prospects, new prospects. So a lot of times he's gauging, where did you hear about us? What media piece did you come off? Things like that, because a lot of times they are from media pieces. But typically our marketing team's monitoring that. And then we're also doing one-on-one surveys when people actually come and find out about us.
Awesome. So then let's look at the growth, right? And how your command, your brand grew 71% in a down economy. Let's give us the hacks that you did, right? And how do we apply those principles?
So the shocking thing about it, Susie, is it wasn't really hacks, right? Because I think 2020 was a unique opportunity for those of us that have been online, right? Because we've been online for a long time and the economy changed drastically. So because of that, the thing that we actually focused on is people and processes. And that's what actually caused us to grow. And because when, the employment market changed, a lot of people were out of work that weren't previously out of work. So we actually started hiring. When that happens, a lot of people run away from a situation like that. We ran towards it, right? Because we've been online, we have the processes, we understand it. So the biggest thing we focused on was hiring and training. Because if you have the right people and they know what they're doing, you're going to be head and shoulders above a lot of other people. So we focused on hiring and training when everybody else was letting people go and not really focusing on that. So that was one part of it. The other part about it too is we took a look at like processes within our company. And I think often, you see a couple different things in business, right? You see businesses that have no processes, and that's kind of scary because then you're like, all right, you're the salesperson, figure it out. And they're like, what am I selling and how do I sell it? Like, that's a huge problem. The other part about it is they don't consider different ways people learn. So the thing we look at when we're creating a process is, number one, we're a little maniacal about it. So like the first position that was creating our company is the publicist job. And that's the person that, works with podcasts and podcasters and clients. And that actual document on how to do that job is 47 pages long because we're maniacal about it. Because what happens is if somebody has to come back and ask you, how do I do this? Then that creates a problem and it creates, you getting taken off of your job and things like that. So that's one part of it. But the other part about it is, of those pages, every 5 to 10 steps also has a video or a screen recorded video, depending on what's necessary, because people learn in different modalities, right? Somebody can read it and be like, okay, I get it. Whereas another person can look at it and be like, okay, I get it. So we're trying to make sure that people are trained well. And after that, we also have all of our staff on administrative training, because we manage our business by statistics and we want them to know how all that works. So they also have a minimum requirement of 2 hours of training a week, which is paid training, obviously. But we're focusing on people, processes, and training. And that was the biggest thing that helped us to grow. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't like we found this loophole. It was, rather than running away from economic changes, we ran towards it and embraced it and, tried to do a better job in that.
And how big is your team, Jeremy?
So it's not a huge team, but we have 20 people on our team. But we've managed to do quite a bit with that size team.
And then give me the overview of the organizational chart. What does it look like for your company?
So I hold the CEO post, which also runs our sales team. And my wife, Brielle, is our COO. So she runs all operations and quality control. And then we have Josh, who's our brand ambassador. So he runs new public contact, talking to new people and running our people that do that. And then we also have our director of marketing, Lawrence, that runs our marketing production team and things like that. So that's how it works for us. And then we kind of get a little bit more granular. We're looking at different positions in the company, but that's kind of the main executive team.
Yeah, juicy. I think it's so important. Like, we're speaking the same language, right? System. Like, everyone wants a hack. There's no hack. There's consistency. And I love that you spent time training and developing. We did the same thing, right?
I think that's the biggest problem, Susie. Like, everybody wants a shortcut to success. And I don't know, I kind of take issue with people like Gary Vee being like, don't do stuff you don't like to do. If you want to run a business, at some point in time, you're probably going to have to do it, grow enough so that you don't have to do it for the future. But anything you don't understand in your company, you become the adverse effect of, right? So you have to be able to understand it. Now, you don't have to do it all, but you're going to have to do it through growth.
Now, how long have you been a business owner?
We've run this company since 2016.
2016. And was this your first company or?
Before that, I tried a lot of different things that didn't work. So this is our first company that actually grew, expanded, and made a big impact. But I think sometimes you have to be willing to work those things through. And I've learned something from each one of those experiences that didn't work out.
Yeah, I was talking to a client yesterday. I'm like, this model's broken. You need to shut it down. She's like, but I'm a failure. No.
Failure doesn't matter.
Take all that learning and go, what do we need to do now? Because this model is broken. Right. And you keep putting money, time, energy, resources in a broken strategy. It's just frustrating.
Yeah. And I think too, that's something society looks at funny, right? Like, oh, you failed, it didn't work out and, you're embarrassed or whatever it may be. But my first business, and I didn't even know what it was at the time when I started, was network marketing. I actually made a decent amount of money, but after a while I got annoyed of recruiting people and all that kind of stuff. I went from there to selling life insurance. I actually private labeled and sold products on Amazon for a while, but I ran into some issues with keeping up with inventory. So I've learned something from every single one of those experiences because I have my master's in history. I was a high school teacher. I had no business experience. So it was kind of like a boot camp for me.
Right. Awesome. So let's talk about, if you look back at all of that, and you could say, some people, you call them failures, right? I call them learning lessons. So what would you say, in this business or in the other ones, because those are juicy too, what was your biggest failure and then what did you learn from it?
So I think for me, the first version of our company, which we started in 2015, was called Get Featured Media. And part of that company later became Command Your Brand, but we initially had another business partner. And the thing that we ran into is, and I don't think people consider this, is, getting a business partner is a lot like a marriage. Mm-hmm. And you have to consider, do you want kids, right? Do you, is this going to be something long term? But you get excited and you don't consider these things. And I think a lot of times we tend to say, that person's bad or whatever it may be. But if we didn't consider those things in the beginning, whose fault is it really but your own? So we, my one of our co-founders at the time wanted to make our business an app, which we were very against. And because of that, we did multiple six figures in our first 6 months of business. But we had kind of created this house of cards for ourselves because, this guy wanted this, my wife and I wanted this, and we were the three co-founders, and we kind of came to blows on it. So the thing that I learned, frankly, was number one, really having everything written up better in a contract, right? Because you need to have ironclad contracts when you're going into business with somebody. And I think that's important. Number two, the biggest thing I learned was making sure that you're on the same page, right? And making sure that you're on the same page of where you want the future to be, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever it may be, and not just looking at what looks good now. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is seeing what is our future like in this? Because like I said, it's just like getting married. If you're dating somebody that doesn't want kids and you want kids and you're getting engaged, that's kind of a problem.
Right. I had the same experience. I had two business partners, right? Two separate businesses. You think I learned the first time, right? And then I realized I was just afraid to do it on my own, right? Thinking that you brought more credibility or you brought something, and somebody always thinks that they work harder than you work. And so that is juicy. So let's pivot.
But that's interesting too, because I think the reason that, because at that point in time, I was wearing the COO role. And I think the issue was that I didn't have enough confidence in myself to run a company, which now I've done quite successfully. So I think at that point in time, it's also having the confidence in yourself to say, hey, I'm going to take a stab at this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But having confidence in yourself is important.
Right. And again, I love that you say, because we say the same thing. It's a marriage, right? Would you marry this person?
Yeah.
Long term, because that really, all the good, the bad, the ugly. And if you've been married, you already know, right? Oh, that's work. So
well, yeah, because then let's say you're in a company that doesn't work out and it's still going. It didn't fall apart and break down. You got to figure out what's the valuation, who gets assets, who gets what percentage, what happens to the clients you're still servicing. These are all things that you don't consider.
Right. So let's shift just a little bit and let's talk about wealth strategies, right?
Yeah.
What are your wealth strategies that you've put in place for you and your family? Building your company is one wealth strategy.
So the primary thing actually we focused on is whole life insurance, but whole life insurance from the perspective of you get a good policy where you make 5% on it. And if you borrow against it, there's only a 2% penalty. So you're still making 3% on it, even if you're using it and paying it back. So that's been our primary way of basically cutting out banks when we need to borrow money and things like that. We do have a house, but I don't really see that as an asset most of the time because it takes upkeep and everything else. But for us, we focus primarily on whole life insurance. That's been the really big thing for us.
Josie. So many businesses are struggling, right? You see it, I see it every day.
Yeah.
Because of the economy, the pandemic. What has been your secret sauce? And you talked about it a little bit, right? Training and developing people. But what has been your secret sauce to stay motivated for yourself, right? I was texting with she's like, I need some inspiration. She just feels beat up. And I get it, right? As an entrepreneur, you're isolated in this box of I'm the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. I'm the champion for everyone. So what's been your secret sauce personally as a CEO to stay in action and keep growing?
So there's a couple different parts to this. So this is what we're going to break this down a little bit. One part for me that's really, really important. So I've been a competitive powerlifter since I was a teenager. So fitness has been a really big component of my life. So the first thing I start every single day with is working out. And now I'm 35. I don't do what I did at 21, but I still work pretty darn hard. I deadlifted 550 pounds yesterday. So these are things that I do to feel good, and it keeps me going every day. And this is going to.
And a bench press, a deadlift, what was that?
So a deadlift is where you kind of hold the weight at your waist and stand up from the ground with it. A bench press is where you kind of come down at your chest. I do about 325 like that.
But what did you do the 500 in?
Deadlift. I can't bench press that. I'm just a little guy.
You got some guns. I don't know. You got some guns. Wait a minute. I want to hear what you did. Sorry.
No worries.
To this, he's got some guns.
Well, I used to be
show. We're going to the gun show.
I used to be a competitive powerlifter in my 20s. So I'm 5'7". I was 225 at that point in time, deadlifting 630, squatting 700, and benching 455. I don't do those numbers anymore. I'm 160 pounds, but
Wow.
fitness is a really big component of my life and kind of keeping my head right.
Perfect. Love it.
So
Okay.
that's one part of it. And this is going to sound weird, and you've probably never had anybody say this to you, but the biggest thing that actually chills me out, and the reason why I don't have a lawn company, is riding my lawn tractor chills me out. So my wife always knows if I'm mowing the lawn, it means I had a bad day. So for me, that's kind of my me time. I put on a podcast and I kind of drift away and do what I'm going to do. But for me, mowing the lawn is therapeutic. That's it. You probably never had anybody say that to you before, but it's therapeutic for me.
I love it. It's not even a lawnmower, it's a lawn tractor. That's a whole
Yes.
other level of
Well,
grass.
I live on 5 acres here, so I have like chickens and pigs and all that kind of stuff. So like it playing farmer calms me down. So that's like on a personal level, but on a business level, I think one of the things that's really important is, number one, we meet with our entire team every Friday morning, because I find that a lot of people do their staff meetings on Monday. I find that's a waste of time because you're already behind the 8 ball if you're starting on Monday. Friday is when we actually plan for our week. So we do our main team meeting, we do our executive meeting, and then we have our individual divisions that meet. And we do that all on Zoom. We do the best we can with that. We also have WhatsApp threads for each individual team so that everybody can kind of get each other excited. That's one part of it. We also play a lot of games. So like a game we did in May was, if we hit a certain revenue goal and also a certain number of podcasts booked goal, we bought the whole team tickets to go see Top Gun in IMAX. So everybody got excited and they were all playing for Top Gun and they all shot videos for it. So that was like a game we were doing. Right now, we're playing a revenue game where if we hit the revenue goal for actually the month of August, we're taking the whole team to Cancun, Mexico for like a weekend getaway trip. So we try to play games that are exciting and that everybody can have a part of and play and have fun in. That's super rewarding, because then they kind of say to each other, hey, what are you doing to pull your weight, or how can I help you, or whatever it may be. And that makes it more fun and tries to keep everybody kind of in a state of games.
I love it. That's juicy. Okay, so you do have a gift for us, which I love, your generosity. So let's talk about what you have for our listeners to get to know you more, to really build that know, like, and trust. Right, I love you, walk your talk. So share with us what you're giving us.
Yeah, so I have a great resource for your audience called the 7 Reasons You're Not Getting Featured in Your favorite podcast, and it goes over all the basic PR actions that you're going to need to get yourself out there to grow your brand, to get more attention. And you can actually get that over at commandyourbrand.com/7reasons. And the word 7 to the number 7 will work for that.
And talk about your book, because you do have a new book, which I'm very proud of you. That is
Thank you.
And it's a real book, y'all. I just want to say
Yeah.
that. 'Cause,
That was really important to me, by the way. I know it's a little thing, but that was really important to me that, we are in bookstores. It is a physical book. It's called Unremarkable to Extraordinary, because essentially, Susie, I feel like we're all born unremarkable. It's the things we do that actually make us extraordinary. So I've talked to over 1,000 people in the 7 years I've had my podcast, and I've taken a look at, like, what are those things that each and every one of them do that have helped them become extraordinary. So I really take these stories and break them down in a way that you can actually take these things and use them in their life. And it's been really cool to see people's feedback from how they've been able to use the book in their life. So if people want to get that, that's over at getextraordinarybook.com. It's just been a great experience.
I'm so proud of you. Like, it is a big
Thank
deal.
you.
I want to acknowledge you on that.
I
Thank you
appreciate it.
for being here. Is there anything you wish I would have asked or should have asked you based on this conversation?
So actually a book recommendation, because there is one book that I think will change every listener's life. And because it changed my life. It was actually episode number 52 of my podcast. The author's name is Cal Newport. The book is called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Because I think often we have this false idea of, following your passion versus finding your passion. And if you're following your passion, you're probably going to be following it a long time. Whereas finding your passion employs, you're going to have to do some things you don't like. You're going to have to work hard. And you know what? You get in this area where when you get really good at something, you become passionate about it. And, that's how you can actually find your passion rather than follow it. So the book's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
I just want you to know how he seeded that. Like, just, that's a great strategy, giving tools, giving strategy. I love that you walk your talk, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you love this podcast and you know people who need Jeremy, I need you to forward this to your friends. Please subscribe to our channel. Share Jeremy's message so that more people can find him, so he can get seen, get heard, get paid. Jeremy, thank you for being here. Thank you for being so amazing. And I look forward to playing with you in the future.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Susie. This is great.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Power Your Profits podcast. Let these building blocks from today's most successful industry leaders equip you with the necessary resources and tools to finally establish the highly profitable business of your dreams. Want to hear more? Listen to more episodes at https://poweryourprofitspodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show. Now is your time to rise to the top of your game, so be sure to catch our next episode. Until next time.